Hello and welcome to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. In this segment, we talk about a standard aspect of the creative and creative adjacent industries, which are platforms where creative service providers can hook up with clients. We have some concerns about a platform that stops the creatives and the clients from accessing their own conversations, which raises questions about intellectual property, non-disclosure agreements, and how safe any of our creative conversations are. Hope you enjoy.
Hey, Pat.
Yes, James.
I was just now coming out of the Gifted Underachievers hair salon and editorial boutique.
Oh, lovely.
And it got me to thinking about platforms and creative.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, I believe it. That's how your mind works.
Well, I was obsessing because we have encountered a platform, and we can't name the platform because I describe them as they talk like Bernie Sanders and run their business like Donald Trump. So
yeah, they're a
we'll
bit
just kind of
hardcore.
leave it there. But they're a platform that connects creatives with people looking for creative services.
Yeah.
How would you describe what we're agitated over? Because you have a good way of summing these things up.
Well, what has transpired is that the platform has always been quite restrictive. This particular, let's call it a work funnel for creatives. And it's also a connection mechanism for people who have work, but they're not a professional creative. And so they say have an idea for their book, or they have a manuscript they've written and they need to connect with a professional.
Or art.
Or it could be art.
Graphics, it's pretty wide ranging. And I would say this platform plays the intermediary layer.
Indeed. And so they charge at both ends. They charge the client who's looking for somebody to help them with a creative project. They charge them a fee, and they also charge the service provider a commission on the connection. And up until recently, it's always been pretty restrictive in terms of how they want clients and service providers to communicate. They want to center all communication within their platform, their online portals, I guess, if you will.
Yep.
And however, recently they have restricted it.
I would say they have broadened the restrictions.
Broaden the restrictions.
Because we want to maintain a certain non-specificity here. But they have broadened the restrictions to really try and maintain control over the relationship so that it doesn't escape their platform.
Yes. And the reason for this, just in case nobody's ever worked through a platform before, is that they don't make any money if the creative service provider and the client work one-on-one with each other and neither one pays them. So they're trying to forestall a future situation where, let's say, you exchange your actual email with the client and they exchange their actual email with you. Then some people might say, you know what, let's not go through this platform because they're just going to charge me 20% and you X dollars, and we don't have to. If you agree to use the platform, you agree to their terms. So most people will just absolutely abide by the terms. But they're trying to prevent something from happening that has probably happened before.
Yeah, and is probably a frustration for them. But I think you hit it on the head there, which is if you're going to agree to use the platform, you have to agree to their terms.
Yes.
And so if they're going to try and create a closed loop around the entire interaction between the provider and the service seeker, then it raises some compelling questions as the creative provider and I would think too the seeker, but we're going to talk from the perspective of somebody providing creative services. It raises questions. Because as we have seen platforms, large and small, the obvious ones are, like Facebook and that kind of thing, are very good at making promises. And then very quickly, within a year, 2 years, turning around and breaking those promises or making changes that undermine the integrity of the promise, right?
Yes.
And so if a platform is capturing not just your work,
Mhm.
if you're exchanging the product of your work with the client through the platform, they are capturing that work, but also everything to prepare and to carry out that service from conversations to literally everything that goes on between a client and a service provider.
Mhm.
Who owns that?
Yeah,
Where
that's
did
the
it?
question.
Yeah.
And this was sparked by a change to the platform's way of operating. It used to be
Mhm.
that you could have a video meeting with the client without using the platform's video meeting, and you could record it, and you and the client could both work with that and know where you were at in the project. Video meetings are really important with remote creative work. It's almost impossible to do everything in writing. So this is a crucial aspect of the workflow. And now this platform has said you have to use our portal and you can't have a recording. We will send you a transcript. And what
Yeah, I
that
generate.
an AI generated transcript. And so that I don't, I'm getting less and less problematic around AI. I see it as a tool. You can use it in some
Mhm.
cases, not in others. But one thing that's been clearly established is that it's flawed. So there's first the issue of you no longer have an original recording that you can refer to and go, that's exactly what they said. That was their exact wording. Let's put that in chapter 9, or let's put that over here on the graphic or whatever. You have to now rely on a faulty fact to base your creative work on. And this might be okay in some cases, but it might not be okay in others where it matters a lot, whether like in a medical, say, text or something like
Yeah.
that, where it matters a lot. So there's just the fact that you kind of need access to everything. You had the meeting, you should be able to have access to the meeting. And then the other thing is there's insufficient proof or guarantee that the platform won't then take all of the intellectual property and copyrighted information that's been exchanged between the creative service provider and the client back and forth, that they won't take that and use it to create products themselves because they have access to it.
Right.
And so talk me
Right.
through that. What's your thinking?
So, in the FAQ, they say it won't be used for AI training, and
Mm,
that it's free to the producer and what not to use. But how legally binding is language in an FAQ?
I would say not at all.
Right. I would absolutely say not at all. And it's not entirely clear that they're not going to use it for, yeah, like you said, to create some sort of product. Obviously I don't think that they would violate a certain copyright concept. And I call it a concept because right now, it's hard to be sure what is real and what is legally binding and what is not legally binding.
Mm,
But you know since it's the language is in an FAQ, there's no real guarantee, contractual guarantee, and there's no real explicit language that lists, here's all the things that this information cannot be used for. I
yeah.
think it's a red flag that for those of us who are producers really need to consider,
Mm-hmm.
is our IP, our intellectual property, going to be safe?
Yeah, exactly.
And that even includes the conversations that we have.
Yeah.
So if you have a particular way of talking to a client who's a prospect, and then a particular way of talking and having conversations with a client to develop the work,
Mm-hmm.
that's your IP. But if it's captured on this platform, where they're obviously if they're the ones generating the AI transcript, they
Mm-hmm.
have access to
Yeah.
what you're saying, what you're doing, what's any images that you're projecting
Yeah.
across Zoom. So if you say, let's share the screen, right? And I'm going to
Yeah.
take you to our a website or something like that. Who owns that IP
Yeah.
since you're on their platform,
Yeah.
right?
Or if you say, let's share the screen, and you present to the client or the potential client or the person who's
Mhm.
buying the creative services the say a flow chart of your work process that you have developed over
Right.
20 years, and it is not available on the web. It is not available anywhere else because you are working with one-on-one with a client who is paid for access to your process. Now this platform also has access to your process. And I don't know that I would believe them when they say we're not recording. They might use an AI generated transcript, but who's verifying it? And how are they redacting anything that would show the client, say, your actual email address or location? Because that's the purpose of having everything take place on the platform, is that they don't want you to know this person outside of their platform. And my thinking is that it's very difficult to enact a creative relationship without being able to use all the tools at your disposal. It's not easy to have this kind of service anyway. Creative services are not actually all that easy to do, and to be limited to a very small bandwidth of availability of your own information and discussion and story development ideas or anything else you've done with a client is hamstringing you to the point where I wonder if you're considering leaving the platform.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I would wonder too if people, going to the platform seeking services are going to be kind of turned off by that as well. It feels a little too controlling, right? There's
Yeah.
protective and then there's controlling, right? And I
Yeah.
understand the desire to be protective, but this, like you just said, they're providing an intermediary layer
Mm-hmm.
that should be frictionless between the
Yeah.
provider and the service seeker,
Yeah.
but they're creating more and more and more and more friction,
Yeah.
which impedes the ability to do good work. So if I don't get access to the audio recording and all I have is a very flawed AI generated transcript, that not only it precludes functionality that is very important to me that I use around Zoom, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and so that means I'm less efficient. I have less of the information that I need to be able to complete the work properly. It's just it inhibits the ability to do the work and to
Yeah.
do it at a high standard.
Yeah.
Uh, so you're creating more friction, which is an issue. And then it gets into like, as the creator, you've really got to think about your contract now too,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? Because I signed very strict and detailed non-disclosure agreements
Yeah.
with people I work with. Well, if I signed that, within this platform, but the platform is violating my contract,
Yeah.
that puts me into violation of my contract.
Of course. Yeah.
And so I need to be able to, I have to figure that out. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure that there's a way to do it because I can't guarantee to the client who
Mm-hmm.
who absolutely needs a guarantee of non-disclosure. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot guarantee non-disclosure. So maybe from now on, the way that I have to protect myself is to tell people, love to work with you, here's how this is going to go, but I cannot give you any guarantee of privacy.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is so. Isn't this interesting? Now, and just to zoom out a little, because I think the reason for corralling everything inside a platform comes from a kind of a one-sided view of what clients and service providers could get up to if they're not seriously managed. So when I used to work I was a temp for years, and I worked in it was probably 2 years actually, and I worked in like an HR firm where their whole job was it was a headhunter. So they would, go out, there was an executive level position open. The headhunter firm would go out and meet with a bunch of people. They do all the screening and so on. And in every situation that ever happened in, sometimes there was, 6-figure salaries, and the headhunters make their money by getting a percentage of the salary, similarly to how this for the first year they get, say the person makes 200 grand, the headhunter might make 60 grand just for placing them because they need the right person, and the firm is willing to pay somebody else to do all the legwork rather than have their own HR department do it for whatever reason, or firms that don't have HR. So So what happens in that situation is both the interviewees, the candidates for the job, and the employers agree that they will not go outside of that contract to work with each other. And there's usually a time limit. So, I present a candidate to a company, they hire them, I get my money. I present a candidate to a company, they break the contract they've signed with me that says they won't hire them outside of this relationship. I can take them to court. I can say, you've got to stick to the contract. You already agreed. Presumably, the platform has clients and service providers agree that to the terms of using the platform, which is that they won't work together outside of the platform, given except for the things that they have to do that can't be done outside the platform. And now the platform is saying nothing needs to be done outside the platform. And service providers are saying, well, actually, no, there's a lot of stuff that can't be done in the way you're not set up to do the stuff that needs done. And you can't guarantee the safety of our intellectual property.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's not that people are bad. When I worked at that firm, it never happened once that somebody went outside the contract. They just didn't. They were like, no, I went to this firm because I didn't want to do all the legwork, and I'm happy to pay whatever I need to pay. And they also guarantee to replace the person. Like there's things the platform /HR firm will do. They'll replace the person if they fuck off on, lunchtime their first day and say, I'm not going to work here. I changed my mind. They just fill that spot with somebody who was second in line. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think it is, I would have to go relook through the contract, but I'm, 90% sure that that's part of, the agreement of working with them is you do that. And I have been very careful about making sure I don't do that.
Yeah.
And have certainly had people say, hey, it's going to cost me thousands and you thousands to work through these people. Why can't we just go do this? And I say, no, I don't want to get in a bad way with these people, and I'm not going to break my word to them. Right?
Yeah. And they've made much money off.
Oh yeah. They made a lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money. And so now, they've gone from that protective mode into the restrictive mode and controlling mode. And another danger of this is, you need a frictionless exchange of information and ideas, right?
Yeah.
That is protected, where the person providing the ideas and information knows that they're safe in doing so.
Yeah.
Right. And so that no longer, I as the provider cannot guarantee that.
No, exactly. You can't
do that. And that includes, even graphic designers who, for example, are doing tables, charts, anything that goes inside of, any kind of publication or any kind of creative product. How are they going to safely say, yes, you can send me your data, your IP through this system and feel like it's protected and safe?
Yeah.
And that's an FAQ that says, we promise we're not going to do that. And I feel like this platform is breaking a promise that they would maintain a frictionless, transparent, ability for people to work. That's not an ironclad contract.
FAQ?
Yeah.
Hells no. No. And it's a global organization. So the idea is that, if they do write an ironclad statement, legally ironclad statement that protects the intellectual property of the client and the creative service provider and put it up, what's that going to look like? It is more friction to go through, because then you've got to compare it to your NDA and go, okay, or hire a lawyer to go over them both and say, here's how they both need to change to accommodate this platform's wishes. The platform is making itself unusable.
Yeah. And they need to list copious examples, because it's limitless what you can, the things that people can do, right? When they're working. So it can't just be, some generic language of, all things in the universe and
Yeah, a
You
lawyer
know,
would. Jesus, yeah.
it's got to be solid.
Mhm.
And so, yeah. And so it's, this frictionlessness is gone, and it raises real questions that I think, again, we're not accusing, right? We're not saying that this platform is going to use things improperly.
No, no.
But in terms of the sense of security that people need to feel like it's okay,
Yeah.
and also to be vulnerable, right?
Uh-huh.
Because what we do is about trauma and all
Yeah.
that kind of, to feel safe, and also like everybody's doing the best work they can possibly do.
Yeah.
It raises huge questions.
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah. And actually, you know what? I like what you just said about to feeling safe, because if I say wanted to work with a collaborative writer on my memoir and I had anything in my life that I did not really want whoever's checking over the AI transcripts, I'm like, why would I want somebody else reading my shit? I trust this person that I have contracted to work on my memoir with, and I do not want anybody anywhere else having access to this material until I publish the book in a form I'm satisfied with. So this
yeah.
developmental material is not for public consumption or even a firm's consumption, a platform
Mhm.
consumption that may or may not be hiring people to review transcripts.
Yeah. So lots of questions, lots of red flags. But I think these are the things that, as and maybe we're in some sort of state of evolution where the pipelines are becoming consolidated.
Mm,
It's larger platforms that are the connectors, or other organizations, just
yeah.
the businesses. And, so we as creatives who are producing content, like never before, have to
Yeah.
be aware of the risks of, the legal risks, the ability for some other entity to break a promise that we've made to a
Hmm.
client.
Yeah. That's the big one.
And our ability to actually, work and
Hmm.
use these processes that we've developed to produce really high quality work.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, the only takeaway I can think of is to really examine the terms of any platform you're using.
Mm.
And really examine them. And if they are not to your satisfaction, then find a substitute.
Yeah, well, and that's the trick. And so I
Mhm.
think, as a little um a little teaser, we're going to be talking about that. There's going to be more investigation into pipeline,
Yeah.
finding, building, and validating, and just making sure everything's copacetic.
Yeah.
You know, so more to come.
More to come. We're on the case, folks.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah, here we go. Watch out. If the world changes in the next 3 months in a good way, started here.
Starting right here. Don't change the channel.
Be free, be free, be free.
Thanks so much for listening to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Hope you have a great creative week.